Hello and welcome to a very special episode where I have invited two guests to talk about the patch notes 2.18. We have Arthurmauk with us, who is a 5 wins average expeditions player that is pretty high on the LoR Guardian leaderboard, and we have Herko, who's making these Reddit slides that we all enjoy and love with the student and teacher format. Unfortunately, when we started recording this collab, my editing program broke once more. It tried to store it in a place but couldn't store it, so a little bit of the early part is missing, but I will put a timestamp in if you just want to hear us talking together. We only missed like 5 of these champions. I will talk about them myself and maybe explain what the others said as well. Let's start with Nami. She got one more spell mana that makes her less elegant to play, was Arthurmauk's point, since you can't easily level up on turn 4 anymore. My point was that you can't do that consistently anyways, since you don't have these 3-cost spells that you need to play a spell on turn 3, play a spell on turn 4, and then play Nami to refill your spell mana. That's just rarely happening anyways. She was a pretty underplayed champion, so it kinda hurts to see her get another nerf. That's not in the interest of expeditions. With Draven, I said this small stat change wouldn't matter too much, since he just dies to Mystic Shot, but he has quick attack anyways. Arthurmauk pointed out that the small Demacia birds, the 2-1 challengers, also kill him now, so he gets weaker in that regard. And Herko was sad because Draven Jinx was his first constructed deck, just as mine, and he enjoyed the champ. He found that he was pretty well rounded, but I was surprised by this change. Overall, I would say Nami gets a bit weaker, but not that much, and Draven gets weaker as well, but doesn't affect expeditions too much because he's just in one card pool, just in scrap heap. For Tristana, we discussed the wording a bit because the +1/+0 is mentioned twice. Grant me and it +1/+0 in impact. We figured that this would just be a miswording, that it doesn't get +2/+0, just +1/+0. And the impact is actually stacking. Arthur pointed out that the impact, that Tristana had a pretty high win rate anyways. So she is just getting buffed despite being strong already. But she will definitely be more of a menace to deal with now, with multiple stacks of impact dealing damage over and over. Nocturnal is a change that rarely affects expeditions. Arthur said he was the second bottom win rate champ in Shadow Isles, whereas I like him in Mistwraith's deck that are 2 all-in for Arthur. The change was that his Nightfall retains from his level 1, but you rarely ever flipped him in expeditions anyways. He usually came down, killed a 4 health or 5 health unit, so this will not have a big impact. Echo as well, small change from predicting 5 times to 4 times. Herko told us about him trying to make Echo work in Constructed, and that didn't quite work out, and I was of the opinion that the predict mechanic was pretty bad. And on Echo, it's just a fleeting hurts him that much. Arthur explained that oftentimes his opponents just attacked with Echo without having any spell mana open, and they just had to discard the time trick again. It just seems too bad in comparison to the Zoe, which just retains their created card. Aurelian Soul was my favorite because I play him in Targon's Peak and Constructed, and generally Targon is my favorite region. Arthur again looked at the stats and said Aurelian Soul was the highest win rate on LoR Guardian, so of Targon, definitely a strong card being made stronger here, but this level up condition change doesn't impact it that much in expeditions, more so in constructed with Feel the Rush, pulling out 2 10/10s and immediately flipping Aurelion Soul. Last one we missed is Renekton. Now he levels up on 10 damage, so 6 attack, so you just did 1 challenge attack and then 1 normal attack or 1 block. Arthur said it's kind of hard to make him survive through 2 attacks, but again, a nice upgrade. Renekton was a little bit in the middle section and not the strongest. This change won't make him insane in expeditions as well. So once again, sorry for missing this first part, but it was just like 10 minutes. And now enjoy us 3 talking about the remaining changes and having a good time. And I hope you will have a good time as well. Okay, next up is a big change with Lux. She was always one of my favorite champions since she generates value in a region that generally doesn't have that much value. And the final sparks are really strong in expeditions when everything is so board focused and you can easily make her work. Now she's only 5 mana, comes down 1 turn earlier, and I think that just makes her an absolute powerhouse. Maybe even the strongest Demacian champion, in my opinion. Definitely a nice change.
I like her cost going down to 5 because then you can curve her nicely from 5 to 6 very easily. And the reason why you're playing Lux is always for the ability to generate final sparks anyway, rather than for her stats. So the power nerf for the cost buff is definitely worthwhile. It's also nice to have the final spark being able to attack the enemy nexus, because although it does mean you can no longer play around it by not playing any units, which I have experienced before in expeditions. But overall, yeah, I think it's a buff that's deserved to Lux. I think she works better this way. Unfortunately, Demacia is already very strong, and a buff to a Demacian champion isn't too necessary, but yeah, maybe they wanted her to be more fun for X constructed.
I think most of these changes are tailored for constructed, and in January we will see a lot of Demacia nerfs that will just make Demacia probably the strongest region to go for in expeditions. I don't know what stat-wise the strongest region was beforehand, but it will certainly change to Demacia if it wasn't it already.
It was Demacia.
Okay.
Yeah, by a long shot. So yeah, here we have, I think if we look at all costs, Lux is the one that received the biggest buff. Cost reduction and the change how her abilities are worded. So yeah, Demacia was already in expeditions the strongest region, and it's just got stronger. On the other hand, for constructed players, this is something, I mean, not this exact change, but Lux seems to be one of the favorite champions, and players were clamoring for some buffs to her. I think in constructed, she's one of the least played champions or something like that. So yeah, I can see where Riot was coming from with this change, but yeah, in expeditions, it's just making Demacia the strongest region. It's gonna just got stronger.
Okay. It's a little bit awkward as well, since so many Demacian champions are now at 5, like Quinn, Lux, and Garen, and they kind of compete for the same mana cost slot, but still makes Lux
and with Screeching Dragon,
exactly,
the other Demacian champion,
the best one. Yeah. So next up, another small change with Quinn. Quinn's card pool got nerfed quite hard. She doesn't have Genevieve anymore in her pools, and Cytherea got removed as well with the big upgrade. So she lost a lot of power. Maybe this 1 health will bring a little bit of it back, and I always just felt like she was decent, but not the most amazing champion.
Yeah, I think this will help her. She's already decent as well. She's already pretty strong in expeditions. Often with Quinn, the play pattern is you play Quinn, and if you have her on turn 5, maybe she gets to attack with Valor. Otherwise, she probably will be a backline so that you'll get a scout attack, a normal attack, and then you have to normal attack twice, unless you have another scout another time. The slight toughness boost means that she can attack more often, or maybe on a later turn by herself when Valor's already dead. So I think this will help her a bit.
Great. Okay. Then Braum, man with the mustache. He's been my first expedition run, and I've had a lot of fun with him. Of course, he shouldn't be too strong because it's pretty hard to play around him, and with some decks you just sit there and say, well, I will never kill this Braum, so he will just generate infinite pogos. But that rarely happens. I rarely see him in expeditions nowadays, since the pogo archetype is not that strong anymore. The Battle City just does it better, this swarm strategy, and Battle Scars is a little bit underplayed. But whenever I see him, he puts up a nice fight, so this 1 health certainly helps a bit with it.
Yeah, he was the second lowest Froyo champion, so I think he's quite deserved of a buff. How people normally take down Braum is through combat tricks, so maybe this extra buff will help him. It's quite rare that he dies in combat without a combat trick or some burn or something. So yeah, maybe that point will be the difference between him dying before he levels up or not.
Yeah. I found it always pretty hard to interact with him with combat tricks, since Freljord has all these brittle steals, frost bites, and also these health buffs. So I just always threw a vengeance at him if I had one, or concerted strike for 10 damage. But even that will be harder now, with 1 more health, like the concerted strike.
Mhm.
I think this is probably the change I like the most. I'm not sure how much it will help, but Braum is a champion with a unique playing pattern, super fun, and this was a champion that wasn't stellar neither in constructed nor in expedition, so I really like this change.
Great. Let's move on to this followers, spells and landmarks. Sparklefly to a 3-cost unit. I guess that just makes her unplayable in expeditions. I used to play a little bit Zoe decks or Taric decks where you buff her up, but now it's just so bad for the stats, and it's the same stats as the Stellar Corn, this fledgling Stellar Corn, and it's never seen play in expeditions. Probably just a dead card now.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I agree. It used to be that Fledgling's Stellarcorn and Kinku Lifeblade used to be compared to Sparklefly to show how the power group has existed. Now we won't be seeing those comparisons anymore because they're all pretty bad in expeditions.
Yeah, agreed. So next up, Twinblade Revenant, an epic, but I had the chance to play with it once on my first run on this channel, and it was pretty insane. If you manage to discard it and just get this 4/3 challenger that comes back to your hand and generates infinite value, that was almost impossible to beat in expeditions from my experience. So just giving it fearsome at least leaves you with some counterplay, leaves some of the champions alone, but I don't think it will affect expeditions too much.
Yeah, the fact that it's an epic means that you won't see it in expeditions as much. It does have a pretty high win rate, or Lost Souls does anyway. What's interesting about this is that Twinblade Revenant itself, because of the keyword change, changes how it plays quite considerably, because Challenger is a very confrontational mechanic where it wants to die, which exactly is how Twinblade Revenant is. Whereas Fearsome is an evasive mechanic, where it's trying to avoid smaller creatures and end up not dying or trying to trade up that way. So going from a confrontational mechanic to an evasive mechanic would change it quite considerably.
I still like it having Fearsome over stuff like Overwhelm, because at least with Fearsome, if they block it, they have to kill it. Like if it has 3 health, so if a 3 attack unit blocks it, it will at least trade and can't just be jump blocked 3 times by a 1/1. So I don't think it's that bad, or changes the play pattern that much. It will still die, otherwise you will just take 4 over and over again. But yeah, definitely something to point out.
Yeah, but I really like this change. I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't want to bet where where is this gonna go. Checking at the constructed data that we have just with 1 day after the patch, Draven's Scion is doing pretty well, and there was always an aggressive build that was shadowed by the, I mean, in constructed that was shadowed by the mid-range build. I think putting Revenant on Fearsome is gonna be interesting in changing the play pattern, as you guys said, and I can see this being an extremely powerful card for a different type of deck, for a more aggressive type of deck. But yeah, I think of all the changes in the patch, I think this is the most interesting in that it's just changing a keyword. It was not cutting the card and changing the play pattern of maybe the whole archetype. I think it's very, very interesting.
Okay. Next up, Tenor of Terror, a pretty insane card from when I played with it. It had a real cost to playing it on turn 4 because you had to actually play the created card, not just create it. I was surprised by that when I first played the card and it didn't generate the 3/2. Now it loses 2 points, 1 point in attack on the Tenor and 1 point of health in the Base of Burden. Certainly will make it worse in expeditions and in like darkness decks. But I think it still will be fine in like Tristana decks or group buff decks like Poppy. Don't think this kills the card in expeditions.
Yeah, Tenor of Terror was very strong in expeditions. I do actually think these stats changes will change it quite considerably. It just, I think, won't be doing as much damage and will also be more vulnerable as well. And the fact that you can't always count it to come down on turn 4, you do need to play into it, means it's hard to compare it to other 4 mana 4/4s or whatever.
But it's still one card that generates 2 units, and that's always been pretty strong in expeditions from my experience. And it goes down to like a 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 in my opinion, but it still will be playable in these Bundle Swarm decks.
Maybe, let's see.
Okay. Or do you think it will be just unplayable?
I think it will be playable, but I think it will be fairly average. I think it may be like a 3 out of 5 or something.
Okay.
Like Silverwing Vanguard, I would now probably prefer over this because you can always play it on turn 4 and it also generates 2 bodies. And I guess I'd rather take the 2/1 challenges over the impact here.
Yeah, it's pretty awkward that you have this 1/3 that basically doesn't kill anything and the 3/1 that just dies to everything. But it's still a creature that generates 2 units. Okay. Next up, Relentless Pursuit. Is this actually a buff for expeditions? Because we don't really care about the mana that much, and I would never play Relentless Pursuit on turn 3 or 4. I actually like that it has +1/+1 now, and if you want to rally, you usually have the mana lying around anyways in expeditions.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'm not sure if it's a buff exactly. In most situations, it probably is a buff. The fact that it's 3 means you can't just always hold it up, I guess. I think what's interesting now is how it compares to Golden Aegis, where that's also 4 mana. It also rallies and slow, and instead of giving +1/+1, it gives barrier instead. Between the two, certainly at the moment, Golden Aegis is stronger. And now with this +1/+1, I feel like the barrier is still stronger than this. What do you guys think?
Yes, I think the barrier just helps you so much if you have like these challenger units or mostly the challenger units that just trade for free.
Yep. Basically, I think that the thinking from Riot Spot here is this is the nerf that most people were expecting for Poppy in Constructed. Basically, one of the most powerful combinations for Poppy was with the elusive rally decks, and this hurts, I wouldn't say a lot, but it hurts quite a bit. So I think that's where they were going for. Like Poppy, which is in constructed the most flexible champion right now, she goes everywhere. And I think they're trying to tone down the ability of the rally decks to be relentless in constructed. But as you guys said, I think it doesn't make that much of a difference in expeditions, and I still prefer always the barrier, yes.
It's also a pretty rare card, only being in the Lucian card pool in the Retribution, as far as I know. So there's literally a card pool called Relentless, but Relentless Pursuit is not in it. It's kind of sad, but yeah, doesn't
The other thing,
impact it that much.
I've heard the card right now. I think it's bugged. If you kill the target for the +1/+1, apparently the rally fizzles, from what I've read on Twitter. So I think that part is bugged.
This is a bug because it's a point. It should say to rally, but if it's just a point, it should just be separate. Okay. Next up, Stone Stackers. I like this card quite a lot, and I lost to it a little bit. A pretty small change from tough to impact to third point of health, but it will make it a little bit weaker. You don't see that much as Zero Rallier anymore. But I found this tough to be a little bit out of place on this card, since no other Banner City unit has tough, as far as I know. So makes it a more average 2-drop, but not that big of a change in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just an average card now. Before it was slightly above average.
Not too interesting of a change. Now, this next one is pretty big. The Aloof Travelers, going down from the 3/4 to a 2/3. And it's personally had me annoyed a lot that it was a 3/4, because all the other PNC 4-drops had 3 health, and only Aloof Travelers had 4 health. So that always was breaking this balance of PNC having small stated units that you can attack with your 3-attack quick attack unit into, and I think that makes the card way more fair as a 2/3, where you actually lose tempo.
I think it's pretty bad now as a 2/3. I think nerfing it to 3/3 would have been okay. Effectively, the net effect, it's 4 mana, draw a card with a body, and I think we have quite a lot of 4 mana 3/3 draw cards. And I think the effect is strong, as in the draw a card and discard a card from the opponent is strong, but sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's an asset, sometimes it's liability in expeditions. So
exactly. You don't have an open deck list, so you don't know what you discard. It's just random, and you might have never drawn that card you discard anyway, so that doesn't matter. I still like a 4 mana 2/3 draw card, though. I'm not sure what 4 mana 3/3 you have in mind that draws a card.
So I'm thinking of the Freljord one that draws a 5+ cost.
Okay. Yeah, but that's a different region. So
Bubbling Bjerg.
Yeah, Bubbling Bjerg.
So Freljord is always bigger stated than PNC, so I find that okay.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about other regions, and then the other one is the 4 mana 3/3 that creates an epic when it dies. From that one is actually PNC. So I think 4 mana 3/3 draw a card is fair. So I think 4 mana 2/3 draw a card, have a minor, probably still an asset. I think probably won't be quite good enough.
Okay. If you compare it to the Eminent Benefactor, the epic one, like the one that generates an epic, I think the downside would be that you only get the card when it dies, so you have to actually wait for it. Plus you get a random card, not a card from your deck, and especially in expeditions or in any format, I would like a card from my deck more than a random epic. So
yeah, I agree.
It's a nice trade-off.
Yep.
But definitely
Agreed.
fair. I would compare it to the Invoke guy, the not the Traveler, the 4 mana 2/3 that invokes if you have Allegiance. That's basically a 4 mana 2/3 draws a card with a small upside. And yeah, I think that's fair.
I don't think that card is very good.
Now let's move on to a card that will be very good from Targon, the Moondreamer, now at a 3/6. I don't think there is any other 3/6 non-champion for 5 mana, is there? I can only think of Swain right now, but definitely a big stat line now. I've always been bricked by these Moondreamers on turn 5 and I wanted to attack into Targon and will have a big impact on expeditions.
Ravun is also a 6 health, so it's gonna be, Targon is gonna be a wall now at 5.
Yeah, when Moondreamer was first released with Targon, Invoke and also Daybreak were all very strong. The fact that this is a body to kind of shore up your mid game, to allow you to extend into the late game, is very strong. So Moondreamer was, I mean, since the more recent expansions has been kind of power creeped a little, but I think this is a decent buff to kind of bring him back in line with what's been happening in the most recent expansions.
Okay.
Yep.
The next one makes me a little bit sad flavor-wise because it changes up the dynamic. The Solari Priestess having a 1/2 being more of the defensive ones that preach the sun more, and the Lunari, the assassins that want to attack as a 2/1. But certainly a big buff, especially Solari Priestess was a card I always liked having 5 or 6 in my deck and just generating value. Now it actually trades with stuff, and that will put Targon and Daybreak over the top, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Both of them, again, slight power creeps out by the more recent expansions, so these will bring it in line. I do think Solari is quite a bit stronger than Lunari because it allows you to curve into things quite well, and Daybreak is a lot more reliable than Nightfall. So I would expect some upgrades to the Leona decks and Targon in general.
Mm-hmm. And you also have this strong curve with the soldier into the shield bearer, and you had a bit of a weak spot on 3 when you just played a 1/2 or banked 3 mana for Zenith Blade. Now you can play at least a 2/2 and not lose out on tempo that much.
Yeah, going from 1 power to 2 power is huge. So
Yes, yeah, that one.
You're chaining a chump to a trade, so yeah.
Okay. Now Ravun, this change annoys me a little bit because he was always pretty decent in expeditions. Now he's just one stat bigger. Probably won't make him playable and constructed, but in expeditions he will just be insanely high statted now.
Whoa.
Yeah. If you compare him to the Moondreamer, just 2 more attack and just basically a dragon now in Velios Vox.
Yeah, he basically is receiving the buff. This buff puts him in with the same stats as Jack the Winner was originally released, the build protocol, and Jack was impossible to kill in constructed was as a 5/6. Now there are more tools, we have more cost to deal with things, but at 5/6 he proved impossible to kill in constructed. So I can imagine in expeditions 5/6 and by turn 5 is like, whoa, how do you deal with that?
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot that Jack the Winner was a 5/6 upon release. I was trying to think if there weren't very many 5 mana 5/6s, and I couldn't come up with
I think he was
many.
the only one, yeah.
Okay, and that Daybreak effect is very powerful, especially with synergizes with himself, and it it synergizes with itself. The reason why I'm stumbling is because I'm thinking previously was Ravun able to generate other Ravuns or not?
No, they changed it down there. That's the generation cards can't generate themselves anymore. Though everything like the Traveler, Loping Telescope, and now for sure Ravun as well.
So
no
does that mean before that he could?
No, I have never had this happen. I'm not
I've
sure,
never
but
had this happen before either. Yeah, I don't remember having that happen either. But maybe the update, I saw the Trinket Trade, Traveler, Loping Telescope, was more to do with Manifest. But maybe Ravun yeah, could never generate himself. I have not seen that happen before either.
The Daybreak pool
I
is
can
pretty
remember.
small overall, so you will get an early game unit more likely. You can get this bad epic, this 6 mana 4/3 that gets bigger the planet plays it.
Ah, it's a 4/4 now.
Oh, it's a 4/4. Well, you see how
Yeah.
much I play
Full
this card.
Uh,
Well,
yeah, but 5 mana 5/6 draw a card is pretty great. I
Yeah.
would definitely sign up for that. Compare that to what we were talking before about 4 mana 3/3 draw a card. 5 mana 5/6 draw a card is fantastic. So
Exactly.
a lot of card advantage. Yeah.
yeah, so Daybreak definitely one of the stronger archetypes now.
Mhm.
Another buff is the Scourge getting Overwhelm. This is huge and constructed as well. In my Targon's Peak deck, I managed to kill multiple people with just having 3 Scourges on the board. And yeah, that was... I don't think this matters that much for expeditions, since when you get to 10 mana, you basically won as Targon anyways. And yeah, the Scourge basically wins you the game if you play him and don't die. So, minor change in my opinion.
Yeah, he doesn't come up all that often. And usually when he does, you usually win with him anyway, or the opponent, whoever has him, usually wins. So I don't think this matters too much.
Agreed.
But it is a
Yeah,
buff, certainly.
Agreed.
Next up, Dragon's Clutch. I really like this card. If I had this, I always tried to only draft 2 dragons in my deck to always draw my Radiant Soul. But maybe that changes now with the dragons also getting Overwhelmed with the +1/+1. Can definitely see some implications with that, with the Screeching Dragon having Overwhelmed. That sounds scary, just hooking my 1/1 and dealing 6 damage to me. That doesn't seem too nice. Definitely makes the card stronger.
I think having the overwhelm option is helpful. I don't think the card is that strong previously. And if I did have it, which wasn't much because I didn't think it's very strong, I would often want the 2 dragons rather than the +1/+1 buff because I'd rather have the card advantage unless I'm really behind on tempo on the board. Even now, I think having that option of overwhelm is helpful, but I would need to get quite probably at least 2 or 3 dragon allies +1/+1 and overwhelm before I feel like I would want that option over the 2 dragons. So.
Agreed. Now, let's combine this Ruined Dragon Guard change with the other change they made to the Vanguard Sergeant. They made just 2 of the best 3-drop units in the Marcia anyways to 3/4s instead of 3/3 or a 2/4. I was always very annoyed when they had this Dragon Guard because it was so hard to kill, and I just knew that next turn would come Shyvana and then I would fall behind. Same with the Sergeant, he was already an insane card in expeditions. And now we just have this loyal Badger Bear being sad that he isn't a 4/4 and Demacia being power crept for constructed's sake. Yeah, pretty unnecessary change in my opinion, and makes Demacia just way too strong right now.
Insane.
Yeah, I agree with that. Both of them were completely fine. They were very strong in expeditions beforehand, and now we have 3 mana 3/4s. I do wonder if Badger Bear is going to get buffed back to a 4/4. I mean, personally, I wouldn't want that because even though I love Demacia, I do think Demacia is too strong in expeditions. But we have seen Legion Rearguard being nerfed down to 3/1, and then when other creatures, the Shurima one, the 1 mana 3/1 that can block, came out, people were wondering why Rearguard couldn't block, and then he got buffed back to a 3/2 again. So I wonder if Badger Bear will go back to a 4/4 at some point.
I would guess they'll change Badger Bear somehow, because right now is a textbook case of, I think there's no other case in right now that you can point to 2 cards of the same region and one of them being superior in every way. Like the other card, I mean, I don't think there's another example of a card so clearly power crept. So I think they're going to change it. Probably I guess they didn't change Badger Bear because they want to test how how the Demon Soldier goes. I mean, in constructed, but I wouldn't be. Sorry, I would be surprised if they don't sort of fix it somehow. In expeditions, yeah, pick Demacia always.
Badger Bear would indirectly affect the Grizzled Ranger as well, the 3/1
Yeah,
scout.
too.
So that might be a consideration since it was actually played and constructed in like Lucian Azir. But I mean, it's still sad to have a card that's totally outclassed. And I find this really annoying because I felt in expeditions the only chance you had against dragon stacks was to be faster than them, to use these turns 1, 2, and 3 when they sometimes didn't have a great play. And now you can't even use turn 3 anymore because they will just drop such a big unit. And as I faced this curve yesterday, Dragon Chow into Dragon Chow into Dragon Guard into Shyvana, and Shyvana was just a 4-mana 7/8. And they didn't even lose a card out, and had to play their 3-mana 3/4 before that.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous. If you played Hearthstone before, the 4-mana 7/7 is certainly a meme, and it's now true in constructed and expeditions maybe as well. Next up, Herald of Dragons. Still think will be unplayable, which is pretty hard to make use of this one cost change if you don't build your whole deck around it. And on its own, it's just a small unit that doesn't pull up its weight. You need to have drawn these dragons, you need to have drafted these dragons, and the dragon card pools right now are already pretty crowded, filled with a lot of random cards, so you won't always end up with 15 dragons in your deck. So I still think this is unplayable, a little bit more playable now, but not a card I would like to pick up.
Yeah, the weakness of Herald of Dragons wasn't that it was a 1/1. Difference between 1 toughness and 2 toughness isn't much because there aren't very many pings, and a lot of the challenges are 2 power anyway. So yeah, I think this is fairly minor. This is you're playing it for the effect rather than the stats, so boosting the stat won't change too much.
Matters way more in constructed than in expeditions because there are actual pings running around.
Yeah.
Now, this one, card some people don't like at all. Like, I find it amazing right now, and again with my meme Tauron Speak deck, but it's one of the most high roll cards. Like, I faced against it once in expeditions when I just had 3 of them and then just played an 8-drop immediately on turn 5. That felt pretty unfair, but most of the time when I see it, it's like a new player and it doesn't even have its effect because they don't behold an 8-cost card and just does nothing. I don't think that will really change with this 1 health, just not a card I would like to pick up, and the ramp archetype is still pretty weak in expeditions.
Yeah, I was surprised that the win rate being a little bit higher, but because it's played so infrequently, that might be a sample size error. Difference between 2 and 3 is considerable due to the challenges again, but overall, yeah, I don't really respect this archetype, be it from Trundle or from Lysandra. I think overall it's just too unreliable.
Mm-hmm. And the big problem is that even in constructed, you have to draw the right amount of ramp cards early, maybe a board wipe or 2, and then you have to draw your payoff. If you just draw a ramp card, no payoff, you lose. If you just draw your payoff and no ramp cards, you lose as well. And this inconsistency is even more prevalent in expeditions, where you have to include random cards as well that don't even help you either find payoffs or find your ramp cards. A big change, I think, will be that it doesn't die to Avalanche anymore, so you can play this on 2 or on 3 and then Avalanche afterwards, or even before that. And that's just a nice upgrade. Still think it will be unplayable. Okay, that moves us to the last one already, Death and Ada. It now deals darkness damage to the whole board. This change seems minor again. Death and Ada was always an insane card, and you basically won as in expeditions anyways if you had your darkness stacked up to like 5 or 6 damage. There was almost nothing your opponents could do by turn 8 if they didn't kill you. And Death and Ada was an amazing epic, will still be an amazing epic, but won't have too much impact on expeditions my opinion.
So an interesting stat about Detonator is that she's the highest win rate card in Shadow Isles, and arguably the highest win rate card in the game, in Expeditions,
Wow.
if you exclude some of the rates that are being really low. She has always been ridiculous whenever I've faced her or played her. And the first time I played her, I didn't expect her to do kind of double damage to the target. She's a bit strange right now because I'm seeing some reports of it not working in the same way. I think overall this is a buff to a card that's already ridiculously strong, so I do think it will impact her, because if you get to your darkness to 3 or 4, wiping the opponents for 3 or 4 really is quite a big difference to wiping your opponent for 2. Although apparently the new Detonator also doesn't double target anymore.
And from what I read, that's actually intended. I mean,
Okay.
Yes, I think it's because you don't even target now. It's just you cast darkness upon everything. So there's a minor buff there. If you haven't upgraded your darkness, it's gonna hit for 2 to everything. Rather than now, I mean, previously, whichever you target, as you said, would hit for 4, like 2 damage and then the whole board. Apparently now it's just a board wipe, so to speak.
Okay. So in that case, I guess it is a buff if you have buffed up your darkness, which you can only do with Vega and the Catalyzer, right?
Yeah.
And maybe spell damage, but that doesn't happen too often anymore.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Would be fun.
Oh wait, wrong game. Kegs, right?
Yeah, Kegs, but there's also spell
I'm
damage. Like we have this Funsmith, the 4-mana 1/3.
Oh yeah, I guess that's
yeah, Funsmith, yeah.
Yeah, or the Dreadway. If you combine 2 8-drops, we can.
Oh, the Dreadway too.
Yes.
Sure. So it's a buff if you have managed to buff darkness, which isn't that often. But otherwise, interestingly enough, I guess it would be a nerf because not being able to do 4 to one thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be curious to see how it all unfolds. Not even sure if any of this stuff is all intentional. So curious to see where it all lands after the dust settles.
Okay. And lastly, this change with the Trinket Trade, Traveler not creating themselves. Loping Telescope, as far as I know, is not in Expeditions, so it didn't affect us at all. It might have been created randomly, but not something I faced at all. And the Traveler, that was something I liked to do, travel into Traveler. A little bit sad that it doesn't work anymore, but you can still just generate another good invoke. And I think it's fair to not have these infinite value chains on one single card.
That makes sense.
I think that's true. I think that's fair as well. I didn't realize Loping Telescope was not in Expeditions. I can't even find any stats for it, which means that it hadn't even been generated in a trade pick yet, but that's just random, I guess. So yeah, I guess there is some infinite value, but not of these kind of manifest. I'm thinking of the ephemeral Shadow Isles one, the 2/2 Evershade Stalker.
Yes.
But that's very different. So you wouldn't want. I think the Traveler is probably the biggest one, but I think it's very rare when all I wanted was a bunch of 4-mana 3/4s. So
True as well.
There's almost always better options when you're invoking.
Maybe one thing to clarify, there was a bug fix with the darkness, fixed an issue where darkness could be created in hand before a cast copy is resolved. I've heard in some other resources like this that they said it was a nerf to Senna. It's actually not a nerf to Senna, but a insane small fix where if you would play a Solari dude that creates a darkness and then you would put the darkness on the stack and you would return it, like the return, and the return would put it into play burst speed, you would get a second darkness, and then you would have 2 darknesses in hand. that was fixed, but Sentinel was actually not changed at all. So, just to clarify.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that either. That's what. Okay, I'm guessing that occasion never came up in expeditions.
No.
Recalling Solaris Sentinel. I wonder if anyone even tried doing that in constructed. I wonder how they found that bug.
I don't know, but it turned from a hidden bug fix like they did with Irelia to just a non-relevant issue immediately.
Sure.
Okay, maybe we summarize it from our impressions for the expeditions. I would say this patch was clearly not intended, or the target was not expeditions but constructed for the most part. There were not even any small changes like the 6-3 to the 6-4 like they did beforehand with Shurima, and it actually disregards the strongest regions in expeditions. So I would like to have maybe the buckets changed to adapt to the fact, or some lower Demacian units that we'll never see playing constructed like war chefs to be nerfed even more, just to equal out the balance these Demacia decks have right now, because I'm honestly getting sick of losing to Shyvana over and over again. So yeah, that's my impression, just a lot of random changes that might not have that big of an impact in constructed, but screw over expeditions quite a bit. My favorite one is these Invokes and Aurelian Soul changes, because I actually like playing Solari Priestess and these Invokes, and making them more viable makes me happy, but also they might probably be too strong now.
Yeah, I listed all of the changes. I think there were about 28 in total, and I thought 13 of them were negative and 15 of them were positive. So we still have more positive than negative, but the fact that there have been so negative, and I'm defining negative as what I consider to be a strong card in expeditions getting a buff, or a weak card in expeditions to be getting a nerf. So I think we're almost 50-50 on that. So this patch has made expeditions only slightly better. In terms of the regions, I think the three biggest regions that are impacted, one is Targon. Overall, Targon got a buff, and it's currently 8th out of 10 at 53%. So I think Targon getting a buff is about right. I think Demacia overall got a buff as well. That was not right, because it's currently the 1st out of the 10 regions in expeditions. So I certainly didn't think they needed any buffs. And then Bandle City also got a slight nerf with its followers, and it's currently 2nd out of 10 at the moment. So I think that's probably deserved as well.
Okay, I have to fully agree there. Beside the disappointment that nothing was directed at expeditions, like buckets remain the same, offering rates remain the same. I think it does some changes to the weakest region Targon that I welcomed, and as Arthur said, making the masses stronger was a bit, perhaps not what I would have done, basically.
Okay, so let's maybe end this video with one change suggestion you would include if you could design the game better. Like one card you would change to make expeditions more, like if you just focus on expeditions, not on constructed, what would you change? I think I would make Shyvana a 3-3, just makes her way fairer to play against. She's still a 4-4 on attack, but at least you can block with her a little bit or trade with her a little bit. And it feels so unfair to have to face a 4-mana 4-5 right now.
Personally, I don't want to sound too negative, but what got me hooked on expeditions early on was I said, "Whoa, this system is amazing because it's so easy or practical for devs to balance it. Because you just swap things between buckets and there you go." I thought it was very clever from the devs to keep this bucket system, and well, also the fact, as we usually discuss in our drafts, the fact that you gotta pick two things, so you gotta balance picking the good stuff with the bad stuff, etc. But I thought, yeah, this is going to be very easy to balance, because you just swap things around until all buckets are more or less fairly balanced. The fact that we got nothing kind of makes me a bit disappointed there. I mean, it's like I said, I mean, there's this wonderful system that actually doesn't require you to balance cards specifically for expeditions. You just swap things around, and you should get balance eventually. And I'm sad that things like the offering rate, which is something that they clearly said this is something we do when we launch new cards, so people get to play with new cards, etc., which sounds perfectly reasonable. I mean, they're not even changing that. That was disappointing. So if I could change one thing, sorry, not one card, one thing, is just I wish they did what they, I mean, they went back to doing what they did last year, which was pretty okay, I think.
And it's so crazy. Like we got Viego in action in July. That's 5 months now. That's like 10 patches where they didn't revert these simple changes. Like it's insane to me as well. Arthur, what would you change?
More following up on Herko's point on how easy it is to change these buckets. I think they're just not doing it often enough, and they're not considering it enough. But on balance, comparing the stats for Rune Terror regions, so what I see at the moment, Demacia highest win rate at 61% on average, and then Bilgewater lowest at 50%. That's an 11% gap, right? But then if I go back to HS Replay for Hearthstone in Arena, win rate highest is 56% and lowest is 40%. That's a 16% gap.
Wow.
So that was one of the reasons why I left Hearthstone Arena to play Rune Terror Expeditions. Even though we think this is imbalanced, and I still think it could be better balanced, it's still relatively okay. I would prefer not kind of being influenced or pushed towards Demacia every time, even though I enjoy playing it. And yeah, bringing up kind of the worst regions back up in line would be good. So.
I mean, it's not the worst that Demacia is the best region. Just imagine if like Targon would be the best region. Expeditions is a starting point for new players, and if they had to immediately play Targon to be competitive, I'd rather have them to start with Demacia and actually learn how the curve works and how good units work. So maybe it's not that bad, but I would love some help for Bilgewater. Bilgewater got really screwed over by these card pools, in my opinion. They just ruined half of the card pools and just put Bayou Branch into almost everyone. So if they could buff these card pools a little bit, that would be nice as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Then thank you so much for coming and for joining this podcast on expeditions. Had a lot of fun. And check out our Discord. Check out our Discord if you want to meet us in person, quote unquote, and draft with us and talk with us. I will post the link in the description again. And thank you for watching, and goodbye.